Today is Monday, September 18th. What to know about an in-depth interview with former President Trump, what advice from his lawyers he says he ignored. Also, why authorities have lowered the death toll from the Maui fires. And we have an update from what was once Hurricane Lee that made landfall over the weekend. Plus, where the historic autoworkers strike stands now, the new iPhone features you can expect from the newly released Apple software update, and why you can find cheap cheeseburgers all around the country today. Those stories and much more news to know next. Welcome to The Newsworthy. All the day's news in around 10 minutes. Fast, fair, fun, and on the go. I'm Erica Mandy. Thanks so much for being here. You ready? Let's do this. Former president and presidential candidate Donald Trump gave a rare interview over the weekend, directly addressing some of the accusations against him. Remember, Trump is facing 4 criminal cases, and 2 accuse him of trying to overturn the 2020 election results. The former president is pleading not guilty in all 4 cases and has criticized the 91 total counts against him as a witch hunt. But on NBC's Meet the Press, he gave a little more of his side of things. Trump said he ignored the views of his lawyers because he didn't respect them, and that instead he mostly made up his own mind that the presidential election had been rigged, and his own instincts were a big part of it. But that admission might throw a wrench in his lawyer's legal strategy moving forward. One of his attorneys has argued in Trump's defense that everything his client has done was under the advice of counsel, and therefore legal. That said, Trump's team has also argued the former president was protected by freedom of speech and other things. Regardless, it's not clear how much more Trump will be able to say about his criminal cases in the future. Just a few days ago, special counsel Jack Smith stepped up his demands in a court filing and asked for a gag order that would put limits on what Trump can say about the election interference case. So far, no decision on that request. One of former President Trump's closest allies, who has been out of work for months, is now back on the job as the top law enforcement official in Texas. The Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton, was first suspended in May when an overwhelming majority of state reps, both Democrats and Republicans, voted to impeach him. He was accused of using the state's law enforcement powers to help one of his donors who was facing a federal investigation. Though Paxton's lawyers have argued there's not enough evidence to support those allegations, and Paxton himself called the impeachment a sham. Well, even though he was impeached in the Texas House of Representatives, most Republican senators voted to acquit him, and with that, he was allowed to come back on the job. Now Paxton is promising to keep taking the Biden administration to court. Already, Paxton has gained national attention for filing lawsuits against Biden policies on immigration, emergency medical abortion guidelines, and COVID protocols. And perhaps most notably, he challenged 2020 election results in 4 other states. Though Paxton also faces other lawsuits and a federal investigation over the same type of corruption and bribery allegations as his impeachment, and a separate state bar complaint. So, to be continued. Tens of thousands of protesters filled the streets of Midtown Manhattan over the weekend, calling for world leaders to do more to address climate change. Specifically, they were calling for the world, especially the U.S., to move away from oil, gas, and coal. The March to End Fossil Fuels featured politicians and celebrities like Kevin Bacon, Susan Sarandon, Ethan Hawke, and, according to organizers, 75,000 other protesters. This all comes just days before a Climate Ambition Summit at the United Nations headquarters in NYC. But only countries that present credible new plans to cut emissions are invited, and President Biden does not plan to attend. Of course, oil and gas industry officials argue their products are vital to the economy, though yesterday's protest was just the first of many. The nonprofit Climate Group says this week more than 500 protests are planned in the U.S., Germany, England, India, and 50 other countries. Organizers expect a global turnout of more than 1 million people. A surprising development out of Maui in Hawaii, where authorities are still working to recover from devastating wildfires. Officials actually brought the death toll down, saying instead of 115 people, they now believe 97 people died in the fires. Authorities say some of the DNA samples were tested more than once, so they made the adjustment. They also lowered the number of people missing to 31, down from thousands just last month. On the other side of the world, the death toll from another natural disaster has been updated for the worse. The United Nations now says at least 11,000 people died in historic flooding in Libya, and more than 10,000 are still missing. Rescuers are still combing through the wreckage, hoping to find survivors. But unfortunately, the death toll is expected to go up. What was once Hurricane Lee made landfall in Nova Scotia over the weekend. But thankfully, it had weakened quite a bit since we first reported about it. What was once a Category 5 hurricane was actually a post-tropical cyclone by the time it hit land. Lee did bring destructive winds and torrential rains to parts of New England and maritime Canada, and at least a couple of people got hurt from falling trees. One later died. But it is now sunny in those same areas, and all warnings have been canceled. By the way, the National Hurricane Center is already tracking its next storm. Tropical Storm Nigel is expected to strengthen into a hurricane by the time most of you listen to this episode. And it's expected to keep strengthening over the next couple of days to a major hurricane by the middle of the week, though it is still pretty far out in the Atlantic. The exact path isn't certain, but at this point, forecasters do not think they will have any huge impacts on the U.S., perhaps just some bigger waves than usual. All right, we have much more news for you still coming up. But first, a quick break for our sponsor. I love that feeling of climbing into bed with cozy, clean sheets. And now I can do this even more often knowing my sheets are essentially self-cleaning. Miracle Made sheets are infused with silver that prevent up to 99.7% of bacterial growth, leaving them to stay cleaner and fresh 3 times longer than other sheets. No odors, no worries. Plus, they're super comfortable and even thermoregulating to help make sure that I'm in the right temperature all night long. So go to trymiracle.com/newsworthy to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use our promo Newsworthy at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/newsworthy and use the code Newsworthy to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. Again, that's trymiracle.com/newsworthy to treat yourself. Some doctors say they're finding it more and more difficult to distinguish COVID-19 from allergies or the common cold. What used to be the virus's most common symptoms, like dry cough and loss of taste and smell, have become less common. Instead, doctors tell NBC News they're seeing much more manageable symptoms, like a mild sore throat and congestion, and fewer patients need to be checked into the hospital for their symptoms. That said, hospitalizations are up quite a bit from last month. They're just much lower than they were earlier in the pandemic. These days, people 75 and older make up the most hospitalizations, followed by babies under 6 months. The CDC also says most of the people who have been hospitalized in the U.S. this year are not up to date on their COVID vaccines. It looks like the historic autoworker strike is no closer to ending than it was on Friday when it first started. Though that's not for lack of negotiating. The United Auto Workers Union had talks with Ford Saturday, GM yesterday, and is planning talks with Stellantis today. Remember, this is the first time the UAW is striking against the big 3 American automakers at the same time. But the union has decided not to strike all at once, so it's going plant by plant. It started with the ones that produce some of the automakers' most profitable trucks. And Ford and GM laid off hundreds of workers indefinitely since they say the strikes are causing a ripple effect throughout their factories. The UAW is calling those layoffs an attack, being used as a negotiation tool, since companies typically give at least partial pay to non-striking workers who can't get their jobs done because of the strike. Still, the head of the labor union says workers could walk out of more plants this week. Oh, and there could be another similar strike soon. The union that represents auto workers in Canada is preparing to go on strike against Ford tonight, since the union leaders say they're not even close to a deal. Similar to the UAW, it's demanding wage hikes, pension improvements, and more. A couple of daytime talk shows have reversed their decisions to keep making episodes during an ongoing writer's strike. The Drew Barrymore Show and The Talk faced a wave of backlash for resuming production. Then Barrymore posted on Instagram yesterday, quote, "I have listened to everyone, and I am making the decision to pause the show's premiere until the strike is over." Hours later, The Talk also pushed back its start date. Other daytime talk shows are still airing new episodes, though, like The View and Live with Kelly and Mark, since they're not governed by Writers Guild rules. Meanwhile, there doesn't seem to be any kind of breakthrough in negotiations in Hollywood. As promised, Apple is releasing its new iPhone software update today. iOS 17 includes upgrades to Messages, FaceTime, AirDrop, and more. Some of the most talked about features so far include live voicemail, which is kind of a throwback to old answering machine messages. You can see what people are saying, and if you want, you can pick up the call before they hang up. There's also contact posters that let you customize how you show up on other people's Apple devices when you call them. Apple says its new autocorrect is more accurate, and it's supposed to be easier to share your location or request someone else's location. Plus, there will now be standby mode, which turns your iPhone into a bedside smart clock, and more. iOS 17 will work on any of the newer phones dating back to 2018. Here is a holiday you probably don't see on your calendar. It's National Cheeseburger Day. And in celebration, fast food chains are offering some pretty big deals. McDonald's is selling its double cheeseburger for 50 cents on the McDonald's app. At Wendy's, you can get a junior bacon cheeseburger for just 1 cent as long as you order at least one other item through the app. And Burger King will give a free cheeseburger to any member of its Royal Perks Rewards program who spends $1 or more on something else. Even more deals are happening at Applebee's, Carl's Jr., and many more restaurants. That's it for the main news, so now it's time for Money Monday, when we talk about one interesting money-related news story. But first, support for today's episode comes from AG1. Some habits can be hard to stick to, but have you ever had certain ones that you start to crave because they just make you feel better? That's what the daily nutrition supplement AG1 has become for me. I was looking for something that would help with boosted energy, better gut health, and a way to get a wide variety of nutrients without having to take a million pills. And now, I get all of it with AG1. In fact, it now feels like an easy little something that I do just for myself each morning. It's 1 scoop of powder mixed with water, and I was surprised how quickly I noticed that it helps me with improved digestion, morning hydration, and just an overall feeling that I'm ready to start the day. AG1 is made from 75 of the highest quality whole food sourced ingredients from around the world, intentionally curated for their ability to nourish all of the body's systems in harmony. So if you are looking for a simpler, effective investment for your health, try AG1. And listen to this, you can get 5 free AG1 travel packs and a free 1-year supply of vitamin D with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/newsworthy. That's drinkag1.com/newsworthy. Check it out. Okay, now back to Money Monday. Americans are starting to invest more in their mental health, and the surge seems to be linked to the pandemic. The American Medical Association published a new study recently that found from March of 2020 to August of 2022, mental health visits went up by nearly 40%, and spending went up by 54%. The study covered visits for about 7 million American adults who get health insurance through their employers. Most of the increase was in telehealth since services expanded during COVID lockdowns. But researchers were surprised to find out that telehealth for mental health did not go down as the pandemic improved, as it did with other areas of medicine. And now the demand for telehealth mental health care is expected to continue so long as insurers keep covering it. Either way, one researcher and author of the study says the demand for mental health services shows there's a need, and that behavioral health should be considered part of primary care too. All right, thank you so much for listening and being here every day. We'll be back with much more news to know tomorrow. For now, have a great day.